This lesson is over section 3.4 in your notes. We're going to be working with solving equations using multiplication and division. So make sure you're on that page of your notes, and let's go ahead and work through these. You need to note that two equations are equivalent equations if they have the same solutions. We've talked about that before. Yesterday we did two properties to help us with that. We did the addition property of equality and the subtraction. So today we're going to use two more properties to write equivalent equations, and these involve multiplication and division. So first of all, the multiplication property of equality. This states that you need to multiply each side of an equation by the same number in order to produce an equivalent equation. So looking at that algebraically, if you have an equation where a equals b, then if you multiply a times the number c, you must also multiply b times the number c. So a times c equals b times c. If you multiply on one side, you must multiply on the other. It's the same as our addition and subtraction properties of equality. And that finally leads us to our division property of equality, which states that dividing each side of an equation by the same number produces an equivalent equation. Or, written algebraically, if you have a equals b, then a divided by c is going to equal b divided by c. Then there's one stipulation that needs to be pointed out, and that is that c cannot be 0. Why could c not be 0? C would then be on a 0 on the bottom, or at the end of an equation. You cannot divide by a negative, so it would be undefined. So that's why we state that c cannot equal 0. So we're going to solve some equations, and you have these steps on your notes to do that. They're very similar to your steps for addition and subtraction. First of all, you're going to make a teeter-totter or a railroad tracks. Then you're going to perform your pinky test to see if there's anything with a variable, and use your inverse operations to check. So this number is not on your paper, but write this on there. Negative 72 equals 8d. And our first step is to put our teeter-totter. We find our variable, and it's right here. It's this d. Now right next to the d is an 8. The numbers right next to each other are being multiplied. So in this case, we're multiplying 8 times d. The opposite of multiplying is dividing. So I'm going to divide by 8 on both sides. 8 divided by 8 cancels out and gives you d. And then negative 72 divided by 8 is a negative 9. Now this is not written in standard form. We could switch it around and say d equals negative 9. And that would be in standard form. So those are the steps that we're going to practice. You have 4 problems. I want you to give each of these a try. And when you're done, turn it back on, and let's work through them. Okay, you should have had a chance to work these out now, so we'll go ahead and make our teeter-totter. Here's my variable. It's a y, and it's being multiplied by a negative 4. The opposite of multiplication is division. So I will divide by a negative 4 on each side. Now on the left side, my negative 4's cancel out, so that would become just y. And on the right side, we need to work this out, and you've got 18 divided by a negative 4. And when you work that out, it becomes negative 4.5 or negative 4.5. And then we could check it. To check it, you would want to just check and see if negative 4 times a negative 4.5 would equal 18. You know that two negatives make a positive, and it does work out to be 18, so that is correct. Okay, the next one. Go ahead and make our teeter-totter. Here's my variable right here. I have an x. And pinky test over that, see that the x is being divided by 3. The opposite of division is multiplication, so don't use an x for it. Though use a dot. We're going to multiply by 3. Now this is really 3 over 1 if you want to think fractions, and these 3's cancel out, leaving just an x. And negative 6 times negative 3 is negative 18. And that is your answer. Circle this answer as well. And we could check it by plugging it back in. Is a negative 18 divided by 3 equal to negative 6? And it does work out. All right, this next one, it looks like we find our variable here, and the only thing with it is a negative, which really means there's a negative 1 right there. So I'm going to divide each side by a negative 1. And this becomes a equals a positive 24. And we could check that to make sure. If I have a negative a, which is 24, does that equal negative 24. And indeed, it does. Really, when you have a negative variable, you just have to change the sign of your answer. All right, let's look at this last example. If we make our teeter-totter, we find our variable, and we notice it's being multiplied by negative 4/5. There's two ways to work this. So let's write the problem again here. I'm going to show you both ways. So the first way is this is being multiplied, so I'm going to divide by negative 4/5. And the negative 4/5 cancel out. And you can go ahead and work that out. Negative 8, you can use your calculator if you want, divided by negative 4/5. And it will give you 10. Now the other way to get rid of it when you're dealing with fractions is you, whoops, forgot my x here, is you can multiply by its reciprocal. To get rid of a fraction, you multiply by its reciprocal, which in this case would be negative 5/4. So reciprocal is just a fraction flipped over. So now my 5's cancel out, my 4's cancel out, my negatives cancel out, and I just have an x on this side. And then on this side, if I multiply by negative 5/4 on one side, I must do it on the other side. And so here, when you work this out, negative 8 times negative 5/4, you also get 10. So you can work it out either way. And then we could check it. Negative 4/5 times 10, does that equal negative 8? And it does, because 5 goes into 10 twice, and 4 times 2 is 8. So that's how we work with division and multiplication. Now, I would like you to add to your notes just these words that I've got squared here in red. When you're dealing with multiplication, some keywords are product, times, and of. Of always means to multiply. So if it says the product of 6 and 8, it means 6 times 8. If it says 3 times 17, you write it out, 3 times 17. 1/4 of 24 is 1/4 times 24. There's also some keywords for division. Quotient means to divide. If it says divided by, or split evenly, or half of, these are all clues that you're dividing. So it says the quotient of 12 and 5, so you would write 12 divided by 5, or 12 over 5. If it says 14 divided by 7, you can write it 14 divided by 7, or 14 over 7. Again, 24 to split by 2 people would be 24 divided by 4. Half of 30 would be 30 divided by 2. So you need to know the key words for multiplication and for division. So let's translate a couple of these. A number, let's just call it x, divided by negative 9 is negative 16. Now when you write equations, we do not write the division sign. I want you to make all division be fractions. So you say a number divided by negative 9 is means equals is negative 16. That would be how we'd write that equation. Go ahead and try and solve that and turn it back on when you're done. Okay, to solve this, you should have noticed your x was being divided. The opposite of that is to multiply. So you should have multiplied by a negative 9. And a negative times a negative is a positive. And if we multiply 16 times 9, if I can get my calculator to work, it would be 144. Okay, the product of 15 and a number. Okay, there's this keyword product. Write down what you think that would be and then turn the computer back on. Okay, product means to multiply of 15 and a number, we'll call it x. So you should have 15x, remember is means equals negative 75. So then we find our x, and it's being multiplied by 15, and the opposite of multiplication is division. So we would divide by 15 on each side. And we're gone, and x, a negative divided by positive is a negative, so your answer would be negative 5. You could check that. Is 15 times a negative 5 equal to negative 75? And it is. So we've looked through some problems that you can solve with multiplication and division. So I want you to go ahead and get in your book, and your homework is on pages 106 through 107. You do 7 through 29, the odds, and 30 through 38, the evens. Please make sure you write down each problem and show your work. You've got to show me what you're multiplying and dividing. And then when you're done, homework was 3.4. Grade your homework first, and then you can go ahead and take your quiz.